have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast here. I'm your host, Coale, and with me, as always, I have my good friend and co-host, Aaron. Hey! What's going on, man?
Hey, nothing much.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad nothing much is going on.
Yeah.
So we are on episode 6, I believe.
Whoa, already?
I know, we're just gliding right through there.
More than I can count on one hand.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, buddy, except you're right. You can only count to 5 on one hand.
I can only count to 5, period.
Yeah.
I did not go to school.
Really?
Never.
Okay. I didn't know how we met then.
Dadgum
boogeyman!
Cat banging on the door.
Yeah, but that surprisingly startling noise actually made the perfect transition, because we're going to be talking about boogeyman and stuff, but it's not going to be the Michael Myers sort, but instead we're going to be jumping over to Elm Street to meet up with Freddy Krueger. So, with Nightmare on Elm Street, any preconceived notions you have or stuff you knew about it prior to watching it today?
Oh, yeah, man, everybody knows Freddy Krueger, right? He's got that sick fedora. He's got that skin condition. He's got a nice sweat. The best time to I can't make that joke. Didn't I make that joke last time?
I can't remember.
Time to wear a striped sweater.
Yeah, but let's just throw it in.
Time turtleneck. It's not turtleneck though. It's red and green. It's almost Christmas. It's the Nightmare on Christmas Elm Street. It's a Christmas color palette, really. When you think about it.
No, it really is.
And he's got the Edward Scissorhands. So that's Freddy Krueger. I know he has something to do with nightmares, right? He haunts people's nightmares or something. But I assume for this to be a horror movie, he's probably like a real guy that can really kill you too. So. That's all I know about. I just know I know Freddy, but I don't really know anything about like the plot of the movie, other than that it centers around nightmares in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much you're right in the right ballpark, like you were with Halloween and stuff. It's pretty much exactly that's how I would describe it to somebody about who didn't know who Freddy Krueger was and stuff. With me personally, whenever it came to my personal experience of the first time I encountered Freddy Krueger, again, I keep bringing this up like the billionth time, but really it was Freddy versus Jason, because around that film came around like 2003, 2004, I think, around that time. But anyway, so I was just like, oh, that's cool, Freddy has like clawed hands and stuff, even though I was always more focused on Jason. I always thought Freddy was like, oh yeah, he's pretty cool and stuff. That's kind of like where I stood with him. I never really watched the films, nor was I really like, okay, I really need to watch it, because comparatively to the rest of the slasher genre, Freddy was kind of like one of the latter ones I ended up watching, because it was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll watch Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff. So whenever it comes to it, I've always liked the idea behind it, and the character design is obviously strong, as you've mentioned. Like, he's obviously stood out to you during Halloween and stuff.
It's so strong that every girl has dressed as Freddy for Halloween.
I mean,
that's a really bold statement. It probably only applies to like 1% of the population. I've seen a lot of Freddy costumes, and for some reason, I've seen more female Freddy costumes than male Freddy costumes. And I don't know if it's just because it is a striking color design, or because you could just wear a long sweater and make it like a sweater dress. I don't know. Yeah,
and that's funny you mentioned that, because with my wife, this is her favorite horror franchise.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
has she ever dressed as Freddy for Halloween?
She has, actually. It was the first year we started dating. I dressed up as Jason. She dressed up as Freddy.
That's a cute
and stuff. So it's funny whenever you said that, I was just like, holy smokes, you're right, dude.
Bam.
I've seen more women dress up as Freddy than I have men dress up as Freddy. Like, usually I'd say it's like 1/3 men, 2/3 women and stuff, which obviously the costume looks great on both genders and stuff. So no complaints on my part, but
gender champion Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, we're about to go into A Nightmare on Elm Street here. So we're gonna watch the film here and let you know, because we're gonna be heading over to my street, as Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff used to say. But yeah, so we're gonna watch the movie now and let you know our Thoughtaronian Cheebs.
Yes, see on the flip side.
Yeah. So we are back from watching Wes Craven's 1984 hit classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, Aaron, thoughts?
I was craving a movie like that. Oh, that's the end of the podcast. Yeah, that's it.
I wasn't prepared for that pun,
It was good.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it was a fun movie. I liked it. Yeah. It was. I mean, it was definitely, because we've been watching a lot of slashers, right? And that definitely fits in that genre, but it's so different for me. It's so different than anything we've watched because of that blending of realities, what's real, what's not, you know? And there's definitely pros and cons to that sort of basis of a world building. But I thought they built the world really well. It was really, it was interesting to see, for the first whole half of the movie, I was probably like, who is Freddy? Why is he doing this? You know, and they kind of get into some of the story. But I was just, I don't know. I would have almost been just as satisfied not knowing anything about it. It was just, he's such an enigma, even at the end, really. So, yeah, no, really cool. I think the characters were really strong. I thought the world was probably the strongest bit.
Ooh.
And then, yeah, I mean, the music was pretty, upbeat. It was pretty, even during some of like the slashing scenes, it was like, I was like bobbing my head. I was like, yeah, get him, Freddy. Like, yeah, and then the story arc overall was just a lot more interesting. It had a little bit more mystery to it. It wasn't just like, who's gonna die next? It was like, oh, like what's going on? You know what I mean?
For sure. Yep. And you could thank Charles Bernstein for the music for the film and stuff, which I definitely agree. The music is definitely top notch there and stuff. But yeah, I'm definitely with you. I've only seen this film a couple of times. Like I said, it's like one of the more recent series that I got to later and stuff. And this is probably about the second time I've seen it and stuff, and, I gotta be honest, I even like it better than I did the first time, because first time I watched it through and stuff, I think I had my bar set too high for it and stuff, and it didn't hit that mark, and so I thought, I was like, oh, it's fine and stuff, but rewatching it again with you and stuff, there's like a lot more of the stuff that I picked up, and I'm like, man, I really like that, and I like this, so it actually ended up being a better experience the second time round for me, surprisingly. So I was very excited about that for sure.
I feel like it's that kind of movie that has that level of depth to it. Just, I mean, obviously they spun off like a million series of it, so it's probably, for that reason in part. But even just watching that the first time, I picked up on some little details in the beginning where, like, there's one shot where they're doing an establishing shot on the window whenever they're all sleeping over at Tina's house at the very beginning of the movie. Yeah. There's even like this little hat hung, and it looked kind of like Freddy or whatever. And I was like, I recognize that hat. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And like it was just like a tiny little detail like that they snuck in there, and it was like, oh, he like they already kind of established he's kind of everywhere, and I only knew that because, of course, this movie's been out for a while, and I knew what to be. I knew the iconic look of the killer. But it's I think it's one of those that probably gets better on rewatch.
Oh, for sure. And I'm going to just also mention the plot synopsis for peeps who, for some reason, haven't seen it and stuff. Like, maybe it's just something like, oh, yeah, it's like the dream guy and stuff. Basically, Nightmare on Elm Street focuses on a group of friends that are experiencing these nightmares and stuff. And they come to realize, after talking about it a little bit, they have one thing in common, and that's the figure that's inside the dreams, how they describe a man with a like raggedy red-green sweater and a very poorly kept hat on, and claws-like fingernails on the hand, and from that point on, they keep having these nightmares as, again, you mentioned, Aaron, they try to figure out exactly who is this figure and what exactly is going on. And so I think because of that mystery, it gives you like more of a narrative and stuff, as opposed to like free-for-all battle royale Fortnite style, everything goes. Again, they're just trying to think about it when, again, they don't have too much. And one of the things I do like is the fact that really it's just these 4 characters trying to figure out exactly what's going on and stuff. So it makes it even more of a dire situation that they feel like they have nobody else they can get to help them out. So I think it's kind of interesting because, it's not them being stranded in a location where there's no help.
Right.
Help is everywhere. It's just the fact that they can't get the help they need.
Right. Yeah. They don't know how to help themselves almost, and there's a communication breakdown. Right. They're trying to convince other people even that they're in danger, and so that's a really interesting aspect.
Yeah, and I feel like Wes Craven, whenever he went into this film, this is like one of his biggest first films he did and stuff, because he actually had a pretty interesting life up to that point and stuff. I didn't know how familiar you were with Wes Craven and stuff. But basically, with Wes Craven, he actually didn't watch movies until he was in his 20s because his parents were like super duper religious and stuff and didn't want him watching that stuff because it was considered like sinful at the time, especially. And so he didn't watch movies until way later, and he didn't immediately become a director even whenever he started watching movies. He was actually a college professor for a long time, and then it wasn't until later whenever he decided, you know what, I just kind of want to go out and make movies and stuff. And some of his first films are actually films, if you know what I mean. It's like a Kruger kind of film. Yes, exactly. And so he actually made,
which is funny to me because I feel like this movie, like all slasher movies have a little bit of booby action or whatever, but this movie wasn't like that sexualized compared to some of the other ones. Like, it was pretty sexual. It's like, I didn't think it was that sexual. Well, maybe it's just because, and we can get into this later, I know we're talking about Synopsis now, but maybe it's just because like these like high school kids seemed a lot more like high school kids to me than most other movies. Usually it's like, hello, I'm 30 and I'm pretending to be a high school kid. So these, I don't know, maybe that just like automatically desexualized it for me, because I was like, these seem like high school kids. There was a lot of talk about sex, and there was a lot of as far as like bare skin on the screen, there wasn't that much. Comparatively, there was. No. There was still a normal amount for a horror movie, but it wasn't like we were watching Halloween or something and you're just like racking up the racks, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And I will say this though, it has one of the loudest sex scenes I've heard.
Maybe that's the other part too, because it wasn't like it was a horny movie in some parts, but it was like funny, you know what I mean? Where they're like, because like that sex scene, the whole first half, like the very first sex scene that we're talking about, like in the beginning of the film with Nancy and Rod or whatever, is like the two kids downstairs are the ones where they're showing the picture of, and they're just like not having sex and listening to the other two have sex, and it's like comically like so maybe that's why it didn't seem that sexual to me, because I was like laughing at those parts.
But it is funny that you did mention that they actually seem like high school students and stuff, and they even make a joke like Nancy's looking at the mirror, she's like, oh my god, I look 20.
I know.
So I think it definitely helps and stuff whenever you can buy into the realism of it and stuff, and believe that everybody's going through all of that. So that is something I definitely give the film major props for. And focusing more on the main cast of characters themselves individually, what was your thoughts like on Nancy, Glenn, Tina, and Rod, since they're the 4 main peeps we're kind of circling around for the film?
Right. I thought they were pretty strong characters. I think like the only they were only caricatures in a couple ways. I mean, Rod was kind of a giant caricature. I'm the bad boy, you know what I mean? But I thought the rest were, even he was like entertaining. And the other three were a little bit more fleshed out, had a little bit more depth. You know, like Clint's the jock, but he's not like the Rod jock. You know what I mean? He was just like, he seemed a little, I don't know, more human, softer, less of a caricature. I really liked Nancy. She's definitely a problem solver, head on kind of gal. And then, I mean, even Tina was like a likable and fairly well fleshed out character. So,
I did want to dive in this because I know you didn't know too much about it. How did you feel seeing Johnny Depp in the film and stuff? With obviously how big of a prolific actor he is now. Did you know he was in this film?
Was this his first movie?
This was actually his first movie, and it's funny how that happened because he was more interested in music career and stuff.
Right.
And it was actually Nicolas Cage who convinced him to audition for this movie. They both auditioned together.
I heard this story. I just forgot that it was like this movie, but I heard that like he just kind of auditioned to go with Nicolas Cage. He was like, "Fine, I'll go with you," and then like this ended up getting this huge role. So.
Yeah, no, so it's really...
but he's so young that I just don't peg him to be like, that's Johnny Depp, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny because it's not like stereotypical Johnny Depp and stuff where... You see, I'm Johnny Depp, you know, kind of, because I feel like he's always in that Captain Jack Sparrow, like, moon.
Especially after that, and his close relationship with Timber, and he's always in that caricature mode, but he's like not in this,
So it's kind of weird seeing him go back to a more like a subtle role and stuff, and there was only like a couple of like Johnny Depp-like moments where he even at this one moment is like, did the Jack Sparrow hand thing, if you notice that, or anytime he screams, I just hear now, no, you know, like the gravelly grit he has in his voice whenever he yells. But he's, like I said, for being his first film he was in, I thought also he was like a solid character and stuff. Which I have to bring up this tangent. If you've been listening to the podcast episodes, I deeply apologize because going back and editing these episodes, I have found I say and stuff so many times.
Yeah, we all have those sorts of verbal accidents that we make and stuff.
Yeah. So, that in mind, apologies to that, because I guess for me hearing it like and stuff I was like,
this is actually an elaborate speech therapy experiment.
This is therapy for me, very therapeutic,
turning you into a brilliant orator.
But yes, so jumping back on there, that's just like a tidbit that's like, you know what, I'm just gonna throw this into podcast. We're just gonna I have some grievances to air.
We tackle problems on this podcast.
Who knew it was gonna be therapeutic? Johnny Depp. It's good. It's good for a first film. I feel like he hits the notes, and I feel like he does have flaws, but you don't innately think he's like an idiot and stuff.
No. He's young. He's hot. He be jocking. It's all good.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm with you right there. I feel like the four characters are definitely the strongest. Like, even Rod, who should be that one person you're like, oh my god, I want him to just die already. You could still find he's like likable. Again, he's just kind of like the big meathead trying to be cool.
Yeah, like I feel like he's the least likable in the beginning, and he grows more likable. You know what I mean? Because like when he was first introduced, I was like, this guy. You know what I mean? Get a load of this guy. But especially whenever the events start unfolding with his character arc, you grow to like him the more it goes on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And even Tina, who I feel like out of the four, she's probably the least developed. I still feel like she's still likable enough, and you get a sense of who she is and stuff.
I feel like they establish her real quick. Just like, here's her issue, and here's her character, and they don't need... She doesn't get fleshed out super hard, except for by a pair of knives. Oh!
Oh my god. Oh my god. Man, you are killing it today. You are on point, bud.
Call me Freddy. I am killing it.
And going over to Nancy, there is a couple of moments where I feel like Nancy's deliveries and stuff is a tiny bit hokey and stuff, but definitely not as hokey as Alice's performance in Friday the 13th and stuff with some of the deliveries, which I still like the character Alice fine, but Heather Langenkamp's performance as Nancy, I feel like is pretty strong, because again, you feel like she is a grounded character, and she clearly has a drive.
Right.
And stuff.
Like, she's a fighter, you know what I mean? And you want to see her fight, so.
Yeah, and I feel like she does. Like, she's analyzing it, kind of like once things are really happening, she's the one that's driving it home. She's, like, determined to figure out exactly what's going on. Whereas the other people, I feel like, are kind of trying to be dismissive of it. It's kind of like one of those things where you're like, oh, you know, surely it's coincidence or not too bad. But she's the one that's like driven to figure out exactly what's happening. So whenever it comes to like main central characters in horror films, I think Nancy, despite having some like hokey moments where you're kind of like, okay, this definitely feels a little forced, I feel like she is really a strong kind of main lead gal.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's crazy because when you first, it's not crazy, but when you first start the film, you think that, you know, Tina is like kind of the main character for a little while. And then the POV just shifts over to Nancy, and then for the bulk of the film, it's her. But like in the very beginning, when they start establishing all the dream stuff or whatever, you think you're gonna be, looking at Tina the whole time until Nancy sort of takes it over. And I mean, I didn't mind that shift. I thought they did it really well, and I definitely would be a more interesting, like if they flopped those two characters to be who is who. I mean, I think it would have been a lot less interesting movie if we were following Tina around the whole time. But
yeah, not to mention, I feel like it just helps give each character, because I feel like we spend time with each character relatively amount, even though Nancy is the majority of it.
Right.
But we spend enough time with the characters to where we start to care about them a little bit, and it's not like kind of like a, ooh, let's see how this goes with this character.
Right.
And I feel like other moments that kind of help cement the world that you're in is Nancy's relationship with her parents. You know, they're divorced and stuff, and so so whenever you see them talking to Nancy, it helps establish even more this world, because obviously with these horror films, there hasn't really been like a whole lot of other people to help interact with the main characters. Usually the past couple of films, they're in seclusion somehow.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, whenever it comes to the parents themselves, I also felt like they helped kind of establish the world and setting an issue and problems that the main characters are focusing. Right. So I thought it was fairly good performances from both sides also.
Yeah. Like the parents served as somebody that like Nancy could go to for help, but also served to establish that barrier of like they don't even think that she's in danger until things start really ramping up, and they serve to like trickle along the plot a little bit. Whereas in other horror movies, like you said, they go to some location and that's where the bad person is, and that's where all the conflict is. It allows the conflict to stretch over and for there to be little minor details, because you have the ability to have those supporting characters that aren't just, people that die or whatever.
Absolutely. And I feel like we've mentioned him several times at the beginning and haven't mentioned too much, so why don't we bring up good old Fred Krueger, as they call him,
Fred,
and kind of talk more about him. So what is your thoughts whenever it comes to Freddy in the film and the menacing presence he had to the film?
I don't know how much I can say without getting into spoiler territory. So for now, I'll just say he's really goofy. Like, this is probably the least scared I've been of a killer, honestly. He's just, it's like you're fighting the Mask. It's like, oh, you know. It's, the whole time I was like, this is Jim Carrey. That's the killer. Is Jim Carrey.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I'll say about that. I think his abilities are interesting because the whole time you question like, is this real? Is this a dream? And that's the question you ask yourself the whole movie, which lends to some interesting, like, you know, for the entire movie to be based in dream. It's not like Inception or something where you're pretty well aware when they're in the dream and when they're not, except for like in the plot points at the end, like who is the top student? But for the most time, they make it pretty clear we're in a dream, we're not in a dream.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie, it's like you're just constantly left wondering, which is like a little bit of a hindrance because you're like, does anything that's happening here matter? But the cool thing that they do to establish that like everything matters is it seems like any injuries that somebody has in a dream or anything that actually affects their body happens in both the dream and in real life. So it's so there is like a tangibility there, which makes everything that happens and everything that Freddy can do all the more frightening because it is going to affect your corporal self. But it is interesting just to be just him as a killer, all the things he could do and all the effects that they had and all the little touches. Like, this isn't really spoilery, but at the very end, even with the car that had the little rooftop that was the same color palette as his sweater or whatever, it's stuff like that makes it feel like I'm watching the Animaniacs or something. It's just like he's everywhere, but like in a very cartoonish kind of way.
I think that's just one of the strengths of the film because with the previous films, this is probably the most, I would say, colorful an antagonist has been.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure that was like a weird juxtaposition because I'm sure going into it, you're kind of expecting like straight shooter, you know, straight up, you know, serious. And so he's the kind of guy that like laughs a lot when he's killing. He makes noises. He mimics people. He does all this stuff. It's really clowny in a way. And not to say that clowns aren't scary because clowns can be scary. And there's plenty of, like, scare factor to this movie. They do a lot of jump scares. They do a lot of grotesque stuff. They do, you know. But, just him as a killer for me, just watching it, you know, I could see how he's creepy. And there's even things that I saw that I thought were funny were sometimes both funny and disturbing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So, it's not like they intended for him to 100% be a clown, but I do think they intended for him to be a little bit more, I don't want to say like light-hearted, but like they were definitely more like creative with him. He wasn't like, you know, I'm evil incarnate or whatever. He was like, he seemed to enjoy killing and he was having fun the whole time. You know what I mean? And that's scary in its own right.
For sure. And it's really interesting whenever it comes to the concept of Freddy Krueger himself and the fact that Wes Craven took inspiration from a lot of different stuff in order to create this character. One of the first things is the actual name, Fred Krueger. That was a name of a bully he had whenever he went to school and stuff whenever he was younger. So,
fucked, Fred Krueger.
Yes, exactly.
Now your name is associated with that guy. That's the ultimate flex.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just name your antagonist after a bully. You know, face your fears.
Well, yeah, now that guy has to live his whole life. Be like, hey, you mean like the movie Killer? And he's like, yeah, God. I used to beat that kid up, you know. And they're like, wow, you're a dick. And then that's how he has to live the rest of his life. That's the ultimate form of revenge.
Man, I'm glad it paid off for Wes Craven. You know, ultimate payback. And the design of Freddy Krueger himself, whenever it came to his look, it was actually whenever Wes Craven, I believe, whenever he was also younger, he looked out on the street and just saw like this homeless guy in like a raggedy hat and a sweater who was just looking at him. And so that image obviously stuck with his mind. But as for the ability Fred has himself, it actually came from him, Wes Craven, reading the newspaper and finding out that over in Asia, there's a lot of people that were dying in their sleep. Like, they would just have these nightmares and end up dying. And it would get so bad that they didn't want to sleep at all. So they would actually hide coffee makers underneath a bed in order to keep staying up, because the parents are like, no, you need to get sleep. And so we are going to remove everything so that way you could sleep. But the kids are thinking around that and basically would try to stay up as long as they can. And I've also heard this around whenever it also comes to like just, it's kind of a combination between the nightmare killings and the design of Freddy Krueger himself. But I heard that with some people, there's like this shadowy figure with a hat on, and basically people who struggle with sleep, that are afraid to go to sleep, they see that shadowy figure, and so that's another correlation that the deaths had, is that they saw a shadowy figure with a hat on.
That's like people with sleep paralysis, and people, no, I'm actually good friends with a guy that suffers from sleep paralysis, and that's a couple people actually, now that I think about it. And yeah, I mean, they both describe like just shadowy figures in the corners of their eyes, or in the corner of a room, or in a doorway or something, that just like terrifying. I went on a camping trip with a guy once, and he was having night terrors, and I didn't know what was happening. Like, he was having sleep paralysis and like terrors, and I was like, do I wake him up? Am I not supposed to wake him up? Do I bring Freddy into the universe whenever I wake him up? I don't want to wake him up if that's what happens.
Oh, for sure. And so
Anyway,
no, I think
I buy that. Yeah, I see that inspiration. Yeah.
There was another thing I was going to mention that I thought you would find very peculiar, is the house that Nancy lives in. You've seen that house before.
Oh.
Yeah.
It did look familiar, but I didn't want to stereotype all houses in the Northeast.
Oh, for sure. It's not what you're thinking, though.
Oh.
So this house, allegedly, and I just found this out recently.
Really?
The house that Nancy lives in, that was used in Bo Burnham's Inside.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. No, I had to confirm it, because it was one of those things, like, whenever I heard it, it's like, get out.
In what way? Like, if that's the room he's in? Or
yeah,
like...
that's the room he's in.
Oh.
Right there.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had to show an article just to confirm, because it's so outlandish.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't believe that it was actually real, but nope, several articles just talk about it.
Is it just like a coinky-dink, or was he like, yes, this is the nightmare on Elm Street?
I believe he was living in a house for a period of time. I gotta check this out real quick as well.
Well, I'm sure that makes sense when you live in LA and think, people are making houses. People are making movies all the time in LA. The house is probably used for multiple things. It's just a matter of time before the house that's used in, I don't know, whatever the Fresh Prince house is now.
Oh, Fresh Prince, we got to bring that up too. It looks
that's
like
what we should be reviewing. The Nightmare on My Street music video.
Oh, for sure.
11 out of 10.
Oh yeah, no. It was funny because whenever I made like a joke earlier about like Jazzy Jeff after. Whenever we were watching a movie, I was like, have you seen a music video? He's like, no, I haven't heard it. I'm like, bro, we gotta watch it. So as soon as the movie ended, I loaded that sucker up on the TV, and Aaron had a grand old time with it.
Yeah, I love old Will Smith.
No.
Yeah. He was one of those rappers that just talked.
Yeah.
At a normal pace.
No,
and it rhymed.
But at the same time, you don't hate it.
Yeah. No. It's sketchy. But it seems like the lyrics are something he's just like wrote down on a Post-it note before he went in the recording booth, and he's like, "Yep, this rhymes." Yeah. Nightmare on My Street. Yeah. No, it was good. If you look up that music video, if you haven't seen it, Nightmare on My Street, and after you watch the movie, and see if you don't notice the same thing because I thought it seemed like Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff, they watched the movie. Mm-hmm. Whoever directed the music video did not watch the movie. And so it makes for a funny carousel. That's just what it appears to me.
Yeah, no.
Although I did love the Freddy, his claws were like record needles.
Yeah. Yeah, that was such a funny touch. I had to look at it close because I was like, what does he have on his fingers? And then whenever it had a close-up shot, I'm like, oh yeah, record needles. So we had to throw in that mention there, even though it's like kind of loosely based on the film. There's really just a lot with Nightmare on Elm Street. I feel like we could keep talking about batting around the bush before kind of tearing right into the middle of spoilers. So there's only a few more things I'll touch on. You've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I think the setting is also really strong. Because the houses they actually lived in, they're actual houses. It's not a prop or anything else. So again, it helps to ground it. And visually, I feel like there's a lot of interesting stuff, like especially how differently the characters move in the dream world and how radically different it looks, but eerily similar, which I feel like is pretty accurate whenever it comes to dreams themselves. Yeah. Because I'll constantly have dreams where I'm at this place where it's kind of like it, but it's not. Like, there's small differences, but it's not like, you know, wacky, curvy, kind of German expressionistic sort of things.
I think it's really hard to portray dreams in cinema, just period. And to base a whole movie around, you know, going in and out of a dream world is a challenge. But I thought they did really well, because it's easy that those sorts of things could get confusing for a viewer, because it's confusing for the person that's in the dream, you know, while you walk out one door and suddenly you're just in a different place, and, you know, the thing that you were touching is now made of a different material. You know? I mean, it's inherently confusing, but they managed to, I think they did a really good job of, like, keeping the continuity, even through the dream sequences. So you weren't ever, like, you could kind of start to tell whenever you were shifting in and out of a dream. They kind of blurred the lines of, like, transitioning in and out of dreams. So, like, when you were in the dream, I felt like you could follow along.
Yeah, and it was even simple stuff, like just having wind blow through an inside building where there's no possible way for wind to be there or the leaves whisking. And again, like seeing like the little girls in like white dresses, like humming that 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And them just kind of being in their own world. It's just like small nuances like that. And like we mentioned earlier, the music just helps establish the mood immensely. Kind of like with John Carpenter's Halloween, how his music helped elevate this movie. I feel like the music is also really, really strong with this movie. There is a funny thing, and I only really learned this because there's like movies that made a special on Netflix, which I actually watched before we watched this film on Nightmare on Elm Street. I never noticed this the first time around, but did you notice the palm trees that would randomly be everywhere?
Oh, no. I mean, that makes sense if they filmed it in California,
Yeah, even though it's not supposed to be based in California, I don't think.
It felt very northeasty to me. Just, I mean, maybe it's just like the way the houses looked, and
Yeah, they had never intended on it, since, you know, whenever you get to Elm Street itself, it's just very kind of like Midwestern, it feels like. Kind of like that, but then you get to like certain strangers, like, boom, palm tree. Boom, palm tree.
That's funny.
So it was small discrepancy, which it doesn't ruin the flow of the film at all. It's just kind of like
that's not an uncommon thing though. That's the people point that out in a lot of movies where it's like, oh, this is supposed to be set in Texas and there's a palm tree or whatever. It's because a lot of things are filmed in California because that's where Hollywood is.
They were trying to base it in Ohio.
Based in Ohio,
but
the house is in L.A. Makes sense. Okay, yeah. That's why these palm trees.
Yeah, Ohio.
No, I think they did a good job of making it look like it was in Ohio, because that's the vibe I got from the movie. Was it somewhere in that part of the U.S.?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other stuff to mention without getting too spoilery. I will mention in the dreams that the characters are in, I wouldn't say this is too spoilery. It always takes place in a boiler room. And I feel like that is a pretty strong setting that you don't see commonly, but like the steam, the leaky pipes, I feel like that's a perfect kind of appropriate setting for Freddy's character, even though he has nothing to do with boiler rooms, like visually. You don't see him like in boiler gear or anything. He's not a
janitor or something.
Yeah, it does play to his backstory, as we'll dive into the spoiler territory, but just kind of hitting the surface, I feel like it's an appropriate and chilling setting that is perfect for Freddy's character, I think. So
it's dark. There's strange noises. There's a lot of obstructions of your view. Yeah, classic. It's like trying to walk through a boiler room in that size. Yeah, it'd be like walking through a haunted house.
Yep. And I feel like we've pretty much have skimmed everything. Heck, we've even gone way above the movie, kind of talking about random fact trivia like Bo Burnham inside and all that stuff. So we're the more you know.
Yeah. Let's jump in.
No, we gotta get ratings.
0 out of 10. Jump in.
Oh my god! No. Mr. Aaron, what would you rate A Nightmare on Elm Street?
Interesting question, Cole. Thank you for posing.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Now, considering many of the things that we've talked about today, many of the factuals, and many of the things that I liked about the movie, we haven't quite gotten into a couple things that I would knock points off of. But I do think there are only a couple things. Overall, it is we can get more into that when we get into spoiler territory. So overall, I'll just say, enjoyable experience. I think it stands the test of time. I would give it a 8. Let's give it an 8. An 8 out of 10.
All right, pretty solid overall. You just went pretty high up there. Yeah, I noticed that whenever it came to like any like critiques, there wasn't any like openly blatant stuff that's not super duper spoilery, like on the surface level. But I'm pretty close to you. I might actually, I struggle with this because this one sits between like a 7 and an 8 for me. Like I struggle on both. Like first time watching it, it was like 7, like okay, whatever. Yeah. Second time watching it, it was actually hitting that 8 mark as well for me. Because there's really not a lot of complaints I have with this movie or anything that's like a major kind of like, downgrade from it. Let's see. I'll be generous and give it like, a low 8. I feel like the second time watching it, it enhanced the experience, which I think I feel like if a movie is even better the second time, I feel like the source material overall in the film is probably really rich enough. So, because, there's some films you'll watch and you're like, oh, that was great. Then you watch it again, you're like, not amazing.
I would 100% agree with that. Yeah. If you watch a movie again and the second time, it's better than it was the first, and that just means it's a good movie. Just
Absolutely. And with most, for people that are a little concerned about watching it, kind of like Aaron mentioned, I wouldn't say it's really scary. Like there is like some disturbing scenes for sure. Like nothing too crazy though. It's those like disturbance, cut away. Like it's very quick.
Well, there's a couple that are just like incredibly graphic. I'll say bloody, and we can go into why.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But for the most part, whenever it came to like Freddy just trying to creep them out and stuff, they would do quick cutaways. But you're right, there is that one scene that
they don't linger on things, but there's plenty of grotesque stuff. I would say.
For sure. But do you feel like this isn't too intense of a horror film for people that are experiencing the world of horror?
I think it's a little intense. It's not like as intense as others, but I think it's definitely intense. It's not for the weak-stomached. But I also don't think it's that scary. I think they try to scare you. There's a lot of like jump scares and stuff, but I didn't think they were like that scary, because they don't linger on things, and they don't really build up a lot. There's not a lot of build up before you get jump scared or something. So
for sure. Which I feel like that's fair and solid.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you've seen a couple of films like that are not too terribly scary, I think this is like a good step up a bit, like turning it up a little bit. It's nothing like too like intense or anything, but there are like a couple of moments, as Aaron mentioned, that do get fairly graphic, but surprisingly it's not a super duper like gore fest. Like whenever it comes to that, I would say it's like on a scale of like 1 to 10 on how much blood, like there's more blood than there is like actual carnage. I feel like
there's not a lot of like carnage. You don't see people getting hacked limb from limb per se, but there's a lot of like, there's a part where there like some maggots spill out of someone.
Yeah.
There's some slashing at people. There's some, there's There's a part where an entire room gets filled with blood.
Yeah.
There's stuff like that for sure.
But yeah, so I think we're both grade 8s across the board here.
Grade 8s.
We're just both 8. I thought I might have gone down a little bit lower to 7, but again, just kind of thinking about it, since it was much better the second time round. Not that it was bad the first time round, but just even more enjoyable the second time. I'm like, you know what? I'll just give it an 8, just like safe 8 there. So this is now. Yeah, I know. I love this part because you get super excited about tearing right into the film with spoilers. Yeah, just going clawing through with your little claw hands.
Yeah, I could tear right into it like Freddy tore into my ass.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm gonna fist ya.
Be uncomfortable. It's like getting your ass fisted by someone who has French tips. You know what I mean?
Freddy Krueger, more like Freddy Fingered.
Yeah, let's talk about spoilers.
Yeah, let's talk about spoilers. All right, go. I will give you the pleasure of the first spoiler you want to dive into.
Well, speaking of gore, Glenn explodes. He just fucking. That's what I'm saying. It's not. He doesn't. Literally. There's not like chunks of body like you could see with with Hellraiser or whatever.
Yeah.
But there. Yeah. I mean, whenever Glenn dies, Freddy literally like sucks him into the bed, and then just this geyser of blood that they focus on for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Shoots up and covers the whole room, and then his mom like, oh, staggers. It's not to say it's not gory. But you guys know this because we're in spoiler territory.
Yes, this is the spoiler territory. So if you got spoiled I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go. Continue the slapping, please.
Slap. Yeah. Let's talk about how realistic those cops were. They knew someone was yelling for danger for minutes on end, and they were like, no, I don't think this is a big deal. They can't protect anyone.
Yeah, which I think just the ignorance of both the parents and the police force. Yeah.
Everybody was ignorant. But here's the thing, is it made sense for most people to be ignorant, except the mom.
Yeah.
The mom literally knew who Freddy Krueger was, refused to tell her daughter who magically had his hat with the sign in.
Oh my gosh.
You didn't think that would be like something to want to. I mean, I understand the motivation because she was traumatized by this child murderer that lived on their street apparently. Which, how do you not know that there was a famous child murderer that killed 20 plus children? They said in the story on your street in. Probably just a couple decades ago, Max, because your mom knew about it and killed them, Max, probably only a few years, because, before you were born, and you just don't know about it. Nobody's talked about it. No, motherfuckers talk about that shit all the time. We're still talking about the Golden State Killer or whatever. We're still talking about and that guy, I mean, come on. 20 kids in a boiler room? Just snatching them off one street, allegedly? Come on.
I think that's definitely a solid point. I always viewed it as whenever the parents decide to stop Freddy Krueger, who is killing all of these kids, they just make a pact of never tell our children what happened. But it's kind of weird because you feel like, even though it's kind of small town vibe, it doesn't really feel that small town.
No, it feels like a suburb of a city,
So that does raise the point that surely somebody knows about Freddy Krueger.
Know. You think they didn't? You think 20 kids got killed and the Nancy with a police officer dad didn't know about it? You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I don't know where all these kids are going, but let's just not tell anybody. And then but the parents figure out it's Freddy and that just it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. How do you have a dad that's like the chief of police or whatever, and he's never been like, oh yeah, that famous child murderer that let me tell you about it, the child of mine.
I think it's just a fact that whenever it comes to the parents themselves, they're trying to dismiss it nah, there's no way, he's dead. Who could possibly come back?
That part makes sense. It's no, we killed him, he's not back. But the part of her not finding out somehow when it's obvious everybody know the kids are singing the song about him, about Freddy, Freddy. It's it's embedded in the mythos of this world that Freddy's the boogeyman and don't you gotta hold your crucifix or whatever, but so like the kids on this jumping rope know about it, but Nancy's like
well
old enough to have her titties out and doesn't know about Freddy Krueger yet.
God. I always took like the kids dressed in white because anytime you look at them, it's kind of like that. I don't know what you would call it in filmmaking, but it looks like Vaseline is smeared on the lens and stuff, that blurry thing. I always assume it was in the dream itself, like the kids.
Well, like, no, they're jumping rope in like that first scene singing that song when Nancy's telling them about the dream, which I would say is not in a dream. But I guess that's the beauty of this film is you have to wonder all the time, are they in a dream or are they not in a dream?
Yeah, that is kind of like an interesting transition because like you mentioned before, whenever the characters do go into dreams, it's not like, transition. It's just like literally, okay, we're in a dream now, like just instantaneous, which is kind of true in the fact that that's how dreams usually work for me. It's
right. You don't remember entering the dream when you're in the dream.
It's just, you're already there. But it's never raised the question for me watching it. Like, how did I know who it is? I just always assume, like, man, they're really good at keeping secrets.
Really good secret keepers.
One of the big things that I know probably with spoilers we'll jump around and stuff. One of the biggest things that I would strike this film against that does drive me a little insane is Nancy's mom. Like, I like Nancy's mom, but she can be the most infuriating character sometimes.
Yeah, she's like a weird mix of like protective and not at all at the same time. She's like, we're gonna get you to this sleep study. I'm gonna get her some help, but then like I'm just gonna drink myself to death and not even notice that my daughter's setting up sledgehammer booby traps while
oh my god, yeah, pulling the Macaulay Culkin.
Right, and it's like, you're not, I don't care that you haven't slept in 5 days. That's all you need. I don't care that I witnessed you get scratches on yourself and convulse around last time you slept. Like, it's fine. You just need some sleep, honey. I'm gonna go drink myself to death because Freddy Krueger's not alive anymore.
The one moment that drives me crazy, like I would say I wouldn't say crazy, but it's definitely like, okay, you guys aren't making a bigger deal out of it. Is whenever they do decide, like, Nancy's having all these nightmares, they take her to the dream clinic and do studies, and she pulls Freddy's hat.
Yeah.
Does nobody's amazed by that? Like, it's okay, we've been watching it. Yeah, we're literally. I get it, but at the same time, they have to be like, where did that hat come from? Like, there was nothing in the room.
She was in like a gown. She was like, yeah, it's not like she was pulling it from her pockets,
And so you figure that's definitive proof. Like, okay, she pulled this hat out of nowhere. And again, I'm not sure if it's just like stage of denial the mom's going through or something like that, but just the fact she's like not making a big deal that Nancy pulled the hat.
I can almost buy that, but like, how do the sleep study people not be like, there are scratches on your arms, and be like, okay, and there's no blood on your own fingernails? You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, yeah, the dream clinic people, I don't feel like they knew what they were doing.
That seems like a very interesting dream to study, and they had it all on tape because they were recording and watching through the little VHS. You don't think one of those scientists went back and was like, hey, she didn't scratch herself. Hey, she didn't have that hat when she came in. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, there are some holes there. That's not like the most pressing thing I needed addressed, but it is a frustration that I have with her mom of not being like, keep her in the sleep center or keep her monitored somehow.
Which I'm not expecting Nancy's mom to be mom of the year, like perfect.
No,
it's just the fact that she's so wavering between both lines, like super duper caring, and then I'm gonna smoke a pack of cigarettes and drink this whole bottle of vodka.
Right, and I understand that there's level to trauma, and she's going through her own trauma too now that Kruger is somehow resurfacing. But at the same time, her motivation to change scene to scene is like, I'm over, like, I'm super protective, and then like, I'm just gonna leave you alone.
Yeah, and again, it's just one of the things it's always hard whenever you have a premise, because again, I think it's brilliant. Wes Craven came up with the idea of these 4 teenagers are facing Freddy Krueger in their dreams, about to die, and they have no proof of it aside from getting wounds, which again they just dismiss. Right. And everything, which I thought
the case was going to get blown open because obviously it's like Rod's going to die in this jail cell, and that's going to be, and then it was really clever how they did the little sneaky snake bed sheet, and so it made it look like he hung himself or whatever.
Exactly. So again, Freddy is still hiding under the whole thing of like, okay, I'll make him look like he killed himself. The one thing I'm not sure about is it's like Freddy has different tactics on whether he wants to make it look like somebody killed themselves or leave it unexplained, because you have stuff like with Tina's death, which was, I'm sure one of the things you wanted to talk about further, just getting slashed and basically bleeding out as she's rolling all around the room,
ceiling and
the walls and everything. And did Freddy know that Rod was in the bed with her? And he's like,
I'm gonna make sure I frame him for murder.
I'm not sure if it's like that. And then Rod hanging himself, that's like, okay, clever, you got me, Freddy. Right. Making Glenn explode into a geyser of blood. What is your end game? Is he like about to be found out? Like, because I'm sure like Freddy doesn't really care necessarily if he's known he's killing, but at the same time he's just kind of screwing with you, which it could be a character thing or whatever.
He seems like somebody that like plays around with his kills. I think that's one of the reasons probably why he targets children. I don't know, but it's also like whenever you like, I think in the scene where he like makes his arms grow really long and like he's fucking around. You know what I mean?
Or even that scene where he like lops his fingers off.
And he cuts his side open to show maggots pour. He cuts himself a lot just to be like, hey, look. You know what I mean? He's definitely like an old pervert type of guy. Where he's just like, look, kids, woo, something gross. You know, if he wasn't wearing a sweater, I'm sure he would have flashed one of them.
But as goofy as like some of the scenes can get, the deaths are pretty. I wouldn't say gritty per se. It's like that fine line of like right underneath gritty, I would probably say, because there is like some intense scenes, like again seeing Tina roll around basically bleeding out covered in blood, or seeing Glenn get hung. But of course whenever you get to Glenn, it's just pure hokiness, which I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's a cool effect, so I'm glad it's in the film. But what were you going to say earlier? I'm very, very, very curious about Tina's death.
Oh, about Tina's death? I don't know. Was I going to say something?
I thought you were. You mentioned something about whenever it came to like the violence of that room, just her bleeding out.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy.
Okay, okay, that was my bad. I was like thinking, I was like,
supposed to say something?
No, you weren't. I misinterpreted, thinking like, okay, he's got something groundbreaking. Like when
everybody shut the fuck up. Aaron has something really clever to say.
Yes, that's what I thought it was. I thought you had like a college thesis, like,
no, Aaron, go. Don't disappoint us.
Yeah, Tina's death reminds me of a book written by this one writer I heard in my English class in college, and it's very interesting with the allegories that are okay.
What does it mean to suddenly become inverted onto the ceiling?
That's exactly what I thought you were going for, the route. Okay, where he's
look at the lines being blurred between here and the dream world as Rod stares helplessly, looking up above into the dreamosphere, where Tina rolls on the ceiling in her own blood.
Yeah,
that was done specifically because Freddy Krueger got off to it, made him really hard. That's my analysis.
Well done, Aaron. Well done.
No, I do think it was interesting because I think there was you can look at this movie, and I think with the omission of a few key kills, right? You can kind of look in this movie and say, is this all in Nancy's head, right? Is this just like is this Nancy's psychosis? Is she imagining certain things? Is she because she stayed up so long, and that's why it gets progressively worse as it goes along? Was it really just that Rod killed Tina and then killed himself, and the traumatic like portion of because that's what like the police say, that's what the parents say, that's what her friends say, and she's the only one that doesn't believe it. Even the ones that are getting killed by this thing, it seems like she doesn't believe it. So like you can say that, but then you do look at like the Glenn kill scene, and there's like no way to like wave that away as Nancy's psychosis, because that would be like the motivation behind Freddy concealing his kills. I think for me would be like, Nancy's like desperately trying to show people that Freddy's killing these people, but like the logical explanation is still it's in her head. So then you're left at the end being like, oh, and especially with that ending where they all seem to be back alive, and it was like, oh, it was all in Nancy's head. I feel like that's what they wanted you to think until the car like locks itself and Freddy's back, and then you're like, oh, you're back in the dream or whatever. But but then you have a scene like Glenn where it's like blood explosion and everybody seems to know what's going on and be affected, including the police, and be massively confused as to what happened. And then her dad sees her mom get like cooked by Freddy and sink in. So other people start to experience what she experienced too, besides the ones that are dying. And it seems like, okay, that sort of debunks that theory. Oh, or does it?
Yeah, and that's a problem I have with it, is the fact that even though with Nancy and stuff, there is some times where I feel like she is being again a little bit I'm trying to think of the word. It's not necessarily hokey, but whenever it comes to stuff like I feel like with the performance she has, it is kind of like at certain moments where it is dry. So that's kind of like one of the things I did kind of like, that could have maybe had another take, but she does have strong stuff. There are some actions people do in this movie that drive me crazy. And it's mostly with our boy Johnny Depp as Glenn. It makes, because I don't expect characters to be like perfect human beings. I mean, that's the whole thing with horror, is basically these characters make a mistake and they pay immensely for it because it's just human nature to do that. But there are some things, especially whenever Nancy's like, hey, Glenn, don't fall asleep.
And he's like, okie dokie, falls asleep twice.
Yeah, twice. And he has to know exactly what's going on, but he is the most chill person throughout the entire thing, seeing his friends murdered. And I still like the character Glenn, but I'm just like, especially whenever his mom wakes him up after he fell asleep and says like, oh, what are you doing? Watching TV and listening to stuff. He's like, oh yeah,
I was staying up to see the boobies.
Yeah, that was basically it. And he looks at the clock. It's 13 minutes till midnight, where he's promised to see Nancy. And he just goes back to sleep. Yeah. On the one hand, I could definitely see that happening in any real life scenario.
Sure.
On the other hand, it is infuriating. Like, who's like, I got 13 minutes. I'm gonna go to sleep, even though she's warned me a billion times there's someone killing me.
And not set an alarm or anything, yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that's just one of the things I can appreciate about Nancy is she's, towards the first half of the film, she's kind of the victim. Like, again, she's just getting batted around by Freddy whenever she's like screwing with her, like everywhere she goes, basically driving her to the point where everyone thinks she's insane because she is so sleep deprived because she refuses to fall asleep. But I think just that flip of the switch, whenever she's like, all right, to hell with this, I'm learning about booby traps and I'm going to set this up so that way whenever I dream, I'm going to get Freddy and mess him up.
Right.
And I really like that in a character. Not to say I don't like the, kind of typical final girl thing where it's just running around screaming. I think it just kind of depends on the situation. Like with Laurie Strode, there was times where I'm like, okay, like, what are you doing? You're literally making worse mistakes, as opposed to Sally Field's character in Texas Chainsaw, where you feel like she's trying everything she can in her ability to survive.
I think one of the biggest strengths of that is a lot of that's just running. She's just marathon running. She's like, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here and close the door behind me. Do whatever. She's doing whatever she can to get out. I think where a lot of victims, a lot of final girls fall short is that where you can tell the director's like, well, I need them to get here because I want a fun scene to happen here, so just go ahead and make a dumb decision so that happens, but I didn't think I thought Nancy was very pragmatic. She was like, and they mentioned that in the movie. She's like, oh, you push through, you're a problem solver or whatever. And that she was exactly that. She's like, I'm gonna set up these traps. I'm gonna Home Alone this motherfucker.
Yes, exactly.
She had several plans that went varying levels of success throughout the movie, where she's like, I'm gonna find out more about him, I'm gonna drag him into this world, we're gonna beat him with a baseball bat or whatever. Yeah, she's like, I'm gonna get my dad involved. She found ways to defeat him.
Oh, for sure. And I will give like a little bit of credit, because even though I will say I found her to be a better bit of a final girl than other ones, I do have to give benefit of doubt to like people that were in Halloween or Texas Chainsaw, and the fact that they're in the midst of it already. Right. Whereas with Nancy, she's only in trouble if she falls asleep. So it is kind of...
she has time to like prepare, whereas most of them don't.
Yeah, so that is the one thing I will give. However, it still stands the fact that I feel like Nancy's determination is super strong, and the fact that she refuses to fall asleep and is literally making herself super duper sleep deprived and weak, which I don't know about you, but I can barely go like a day without sleeping.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty tapped out afterwards.
I didn't buy how well she was functioning. Like, she was already on like 5 days of sleep deprivation when she was like reading through the booby trap book. Whatever. And I was like, I can't read if I lose like 3 hours of sleep, much less 5 days. But also, she's in high school. Yeah, sure, that helps.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, just has that young vigor,
and was taking caffeine pills and other things. Yeah, she was doing what she could. I would have liked to seen a few more scenes of her just like absolutely exhausted, and then like jolting herself awake.
Oh, for sure.
Like doing some push-ups or something, just to be like, all right, wake up.
Yeah, which I feel like she did have like a couple of scenes that were pretty good, but I wish it would have been a little bit more. Like whenever she falls asleep in the bathtub, and stuff. Like I feel like, again, visually, there's a lot of cool stuff they do in the dream sequences. Like whenever Freddy grabs her and pulls her into the tub, and you just see it drowning. I feel like that's a really visually nice, cool scene.
That was one of those like. That seemed like they were going for an iconic slasher shot with like Freddy's hand going between her legs or whatever. It's like, yes, this is what slasher films are about. Here's the killer. Here's a naked lady. It seems like they're really trying to make that into a movie frame you could print out. You know?
Oh, and they did. They used it for trailers and everything. So yeah,
I feel like they're trying super hard there. But I also I don't know. I also didn't find that as sexual as some of the other scenes, because honestly, and I think this is part of it, Nancy is like not a typical horror movie victim girl where she's gonna go like have some raunchy sex and then die. Like she literally turns down sex from Johnny Depp on like, multiple occasions because she's worried about not fucking dying, or worried about in the beginning being there for her friend.
Watch out for Tina,
right? So that's kind of, I think, why I feel like it wasn't that sexualized. You know what I mean? Even though I feel like the camera tried to sexualize people in certain spots, like Nancy, the main character, was like, okay, I'm not trying to get dick right now. I'm trying to not die.
No, I think that's strong. And whenever it comes to Freddy and stuff, because I know we kind of mentioned at the beginning about how goofy he is, kind of Jim Carrey-esque. Right. How does he rank amongst the other killers for you so far? Because he is definitely the most hokey of all the killers. Yeah. But it's also... You gotta love how hokey he is.
I love, like, whenever I said earlier that it's like it was like a murder version of The Mask. Like, I kind of like that. It made the film not seem. It still was definitely like a horror movie. It was definitely like a slasher, but it made the movie not seem like it was trying to take itself that seriously. Like it wasn't trying to take itself too seriously enough that you buy the premise and you're rooting for the characters and you don't want them to die and that Freddy's scary or whatever. But it wasn't like that scary. It wasn't trying to be like one of those, this is based on a true story. Yeah. Please piss yourself tonight. You know, it was like, here's an interesting tale. And I think it benefited all the more from that. That being said, like, I don't have the urge to go dress up as Freddy for Halloween. You know what I mean? Oh, but not saying it's not a great costume. And he's very iconic, but yeah, he's like funny that way. If I was trying to pick somebody, it was like, all right, you could pick 3 scary movie guys to scare the piss out of somebody. Put them in a haunted house and make them real scared. Like Freddy would not cross my mind. Like he's not scary.
I would probably agree. Like watching it, there wasn't a lot of scenes where he wasn't scary. There was like some disturbing scenes a little bit, but there was some funny stuff like,
I'm your boyfriend now.
That was hilarious. Like the tongue comes out and just like tickles her lips. That's some masks. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm your boyfriend now.
But I also feel like if he had played it straight, just bad guy,
it would have been cornier, I think, honestly, because like this was like corny funny. It was like self-aware.
Yeah.
But I think if they tried to take that same character and just make him scary and remove anything hokey, I think it would have been for the worse.
Yeah, I think Robert Englund's performance as Freddy Krueger is really strong, and obviously that's the thing people remember and stuff they continue to remember, and that's why, I think everyone just enjoys watching him just be goofy.
Yeah.
And so, like, because with the other killers, it is definitely kind of like, oh man, got to see, like, the carnage he's going to cause. He's going to mess stuff up.
Right.
Whereas with Freddy, it's kind of like, yeah, you'll get to see him kind of, like, mess people up, but it's also just screw around with them.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely has power over them, and he likes he's playing with the kills, which also makes a lot of more sense if you want to like do fun things with your killer without like having to stick to pure logic of like, okay, if Michael, you wanted to kill somebody, Mike Myers wanted to kill somebody with his knife, he should run up to them and kill them with his knife. That's the most logical explanation,
Yeah.
So then it looks kind of weird whenever he gets poked with a knitting needle and lies down on the ground or whatever. Versus Freddy, he's like already kind of this comical guy. Like, even though the scenes were like really corny, I bought that like he would be stunned by getting hit by a coffee pot for a while, and he's like, oh goodness.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is I think whenever he's brought out of the dream world, he loses his power.
Right.
Because, he has this infinite amount of power and ability to do it, which I feel like they did a pretty good job establishing the rules, but also didn't define it. So there's some like loose ends where it's like, okay, well, how does it work? Like, for instance, whenever Nancy is determined to check on Glenn to see not Glenn, Rod.
Yeah.
Rod's going, and then, like, Glenn, I guess, is, like, talking to her while she's asleep, and then he appears back. It's kind of like that loose thing of, like, okay, what does this mean? Like, are the dreams actually connected with each other? So that was really the only times where I'm like, not sure really how the power works, but it was funny seeing Nancy pull Freddy out and basically just mess him up. Like, it's
she bodied him.
Yeah, it's so enjoyable. And especially the final scene whenever she throws that gasoline on and he's just burning alive and then falls down the stairs.
Yeah.
Tries crawling again. And then even seeing, like, one of my favorite moments is whenever she finally convinces her dad to go inside and be like, look, I got him. And then they're trying to look like, where is it? And there's the fiery footprints leading up the stairs. It's like so comedic and yet amazing at the same time. I'm like, I'm so glad that he's like, I want these steps to be like on fire, like they are just literally perfectly shaped on fire. But I feel like the effects overall with Freddy, like, they are a little bit hooky. There was a couple of good scenes I'm like, wow, that was really good. But like the arm stretching scene, doing that, or even the scene where Nancy's running up the stairs, which apparently Wes Craven hated, but the guy who helped fund the film really wanted that in the movie, so it was like kind of like a fine, throw it in. Whenever
which scene?
The one where Nancy's trying to run up the stairs and her feet are sinking into the stairs.
Oh, I kind of liked that.
Me too. That's kind of like where I'm at. So
it felt very dreamlike, where you're walking and suddenly you can't walk. It was like a great way to visualize that, like in a way that's like, if viewer can understand, like, these stairs are now jelly, you know what I mean?
No, for sure. And it's like, even though the effect I feel like isn't done very well, I still like it. The one effect I cannot get over is at the very end. The very end.
With the car?
No. I think the car is fine. I feel like the ending overall is actually fine. I kind of like how it sets it up. It's whenever Freddy Krueger grabs Nancy's mom and pulls her through the window.
Through the little top window.
Like that little blow-up doll thing.
Yeah, and it's just like...
Which, it doesn't really matter too much, but it's definitely one of those things that takes me out of it, seeing that.
The ending was like, oh man, the ending was not as strong for me as the rest of the movie. And I if it ended before the Freddy stuff happened, I would have been really mad if they were just like, it was all a dream or whatever, and all these people didn't die at all. That would have sucked. But like, it seemed like that last scene was just another dream where she was like remembering how things used to be, and then Freddy's influence is still there or something. It definitely left it open to interpretation on purpose. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about it. There's not like a little. It's not like a neat little bow tied onto it, which I don't think you necessarily need a super neat little bow, but like at the same time, for an entire film that was like sort of narratively, plot-wise, like wishy-washy on purpose, because like what's real, what's not, what's in the dream, what's in the real world, to have that film also not have closed ends, I don't know how I feel about it. Is that appropriate because the whole thing's just a big wiggly mess? It's just an experience that doesn't have a neat plot structure? Or is it like, okay, you gotta give me something. You gotta give me something to hold on to.
Which apparently they had several endings for the film that they were trying to play about exactly like, is Freddy gonna come back? Is he not? So I feel like the ending is kind of... I feel like Freddy should have just been maybe like dead whenever he caught on fire. So I think the part where he goes after Nancy's mom to kill her. Right. And then like her body sinks to the mattress. And then he comes back, and then Nancy's like, "You have no power over me." And he's like, "No."
Yeah.
I feel like that's a little bit hokey, but then again, maybe that's just part of the dream, like in her head.
Yeah.
It's so
like they
weird.
Wanted to mash a lot into the end, but they were running out of time. They were like, "Okay, we don't kill the mom too," and then she needs to finally realize that she needs to turn her back, like she discovered earlier in the movie. But
so I definitely feel like it does kind of. Again, it doesn't, as you say, have a nice kind of bow on top kind of ending, but I still really enjoy this film. Like, there's a lot to like about it. And surprisingly, after the first time watching it, I didn't think I would really want to watch it again, but this second time round, it just, there was definitely a lot to respect. And while I know I rated Friday the 13th an 8 out of 10, I would probably still place that a little above Nightmare on Elm Street for me personally, because there's just a lot of stuff I like about it. Maybe it's just biased because it's one of the first horror movies I watched, but it's still like low 8.
Movie.
Yeah,
I forget exactly what I rated it, but there's something in that
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
You rated it 7 out of 10.
That makes sense. Yeah. I thought it was a little bit more traditional.
For sure.
And like, it's not a bad thing. This movie definitely played around with a lot of stuff, and I feel like it succeeded, and so I give it a lot of credit for that. Yeah,
and this was a huge success, by the way. Like, it was a major success to where New Line Cinema, which obviously you recognize them for like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, this was their very first movie.
Oh, okay. Because I mean, I saw the logo when it popped up, and I was like, "Oh, New Line, okay." And I knew it was like, because this movie came a little after some of these movies we've been watching, so it made sense to me because I was like, "Okay, they understand the value in horror movies now." But I didn't realize it was their first.
Yep, it was the very first movie, and the budget was $1.1 million, and according to Wikipedia, it made $57 million.
That's a profit, baby.
Yep, and so that's basically kind of what helped make New Line Cinema who they are and build up the company, because nobody wanted to make this film.
Right.
So I think just the fact that it did so well, and of course they had to spend many sequels that would continue getting in money. I think it's definitely great and strong, and I feel like because Wes Craven did have a unique spin on the world of horror, because this came out in 1984, like slashers had been consistently done really religiously after Halloween in 1978, so you have like 6 years of slashers kind of literally copy paste, where it's like realistic, just a madman going around killing people. So I could definitely give mad respect to Nightmare on Elm Street on what it did for the world of horror.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any closing thoughts or anything else you had before wrapping up this episode, Aaron?
I don't think so. Yeah. I guess the only other thing I would touch on is the music choice. I think was really interesting. I kind of mentioned that it was upbeat, but usually there wasn't like, I feel like the soundtrack didn't have a lot of those tones that was meant to make you feel eerie or creepy, even though they could have easily slid this in. I feel like most of the time whenever music was used, even in moments like leading up to a kill or a chase or something, it felt much more like I was like listening to like an action movie soundtrack, I guess, or something. Not like generic action music. I don't want to say that, but like that's the kind of mood that it was putting you in. And so I just feel like the way they played with mood, was also not the way specifically the score played with mood was also not stereotypical of a horror movie. And so I would give it props for that as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely think the music is strong, and like again for me, it's just very iconic. The theme, like the ding 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 ding.
It's kind of like a boss fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like super duper scary, but it at least establishes the mood for me.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of. I feel like it is just very dreamlike music that would. It just nails it perfectly whenever it hits a tone. So it's definitely something I always listen to anytime the Halloween season is up and running. So obviously listen to the soundtrack as much as you can, especially Nightmare on My Street.
Yeah. Hey, that song is not affiliated with Nightmare on Elm Street. Any
Oh yeah.
If you watch the music video, it'll be very explicit.
Scratch that. It has nothing to do. It's just coincidence.
It's very much a coincidence that he wrote Nightmare on My Street.
And the guy's name is Fred. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So yeah, I had a great time watching this movie overall with you, talking about it. I felt like we were able to really hit home a lot of plot points and stuff like that. So with this next film, we're actually going to be taking a step back from the 80s itself and jump back over to the late 70s with this film, where it will take place where most people cannot help you at all. And
space?
Yes, it is in space.
Where no one can hear you scream?
That's a tagline for this next movie. All right, so
let's do it.
All right, you ready for it? So, yep. Thank you guys for listening to our episode here, and tune in next time whenever we take a trip in our little rocket ship into space, where we're going to be jumping into Ridley Scott's 1979 hit Alien. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Goodbye.
On my street.
Play us out. We got the rights to this song. Yeah, we paid the monies. My street.
On my street. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @ColeKirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're poppin' the scary.